Discover over 100 episodes of Bartholomewtown on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Bartholomewtown Podcast.
We put out news, and its value is determined by people's acceptance of us being objective and that we're trying to do balanced news. I was into Twitter for a while. Now I read it a lot, and even then, it's distracting. It's just sort of like looking through a comic book. It's not really adding much to my understanding of things.
Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomewtown Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, I sit down with NBC10 reporter Bill Rappleye. Bill Rappleye, no stranger to anyone who's grown up in this area, that's for sure. A longtime companion to many through the television screen and certainly a reporter's reporter, a trusted news source here in this market, and someone who, to me anyway, always seemed to come across as an authentic character on the television screen. So great to sit down with Bill Rapp talking his career in journalism, what it's been like working for a variety of corporations that have been the parent company of the outlet he's been employed by, plus a whole lot more. So stick around for a fun conversation with NBC10's Bill Rappleye in just a matter of moments. All right, Bartholomewtown listeners, you know it's back. Now through November 3rd at Roger Williams Park Zoo, it's the Jack-O-Lantern Spectacular 2019 presented by Citizens Bank. Remember, this year, you're traveling through a seasonal wonderland, celebrating the joys of New England. Feast your senses on autumn's beauty, winter's swirling snow, spring's first blossoms, and summer's ocean breezes. It's all intricately carved on thousands of pumpkins displayed along the zoo's wetlands trails. It's the Jack-O-Lantern Spectacular 2019, presented by Citizens Bank, now through November 3rd at Roger Williams Park Zoo in Providence. A great way that you can support the pod is to subscribe, rate, and review on your preferred podcast app. And for daily content on Twitter, follow at Bill Bartholomew, and over on Instagram at Bartholomewtown Podcast. All right, let's get right to it. My conversation with the one and only Bill Rappleye. How'd you get started? I remember you kind of like early 2000s. I feel like that's when you kind of appeared. Right. You had the fedora, the whole thing.
I came back from out of town in 2002. So I've been with Channel 10 for 17 years. Yeah, a little more. I still consider myself one of the new kids over there. You know, we got Mario Hilario and Barbara Moore Silva, Gene and Patrice. I mean, Frank is retired. Brian Crandall was there when I started, but he wasn't full-time. And I think he may have... Alison Bologna came, then she went to Boston, then she came back. And now, you know, there are these... there's this new job called MMJ or VJ, multimedia journalist or video journalist, and these are basically one-man bands. So all the new people have been hired in the last five years do both. They do their own camera work, and they're younger, and they don't tend to last that long. They do a 2-year contract. It's a real burnout because it's a lot of work. That's how I started in Fall River back in '82. As a one-man band on the cable TV back there. And after 2.5 years of that, it's just exhausting because, A, you're by yourself driving around all day, which is not fun. Well, no, it's not as fun,
exactly, that's for sure.
And B, you're just scrambling all day long trying to get all your stuff together, and then you have to edit it, and then you have to write it, and it's just, it's a real burnout. So in '84... Dave Lehman hired me over at Channel 6.
Sure, yep.
And I wasn't hired as a reporter, but I wanted to stay in the business. So I was a producer. I'd come in at 4 a.m., produce the morning cut-ins. This was before we had the Sunrise show. In fact, Frank Coletta was across town at Channel 10 doing the cut-ins over there. And it was like 6:55, 7:25, and 8:25. For 3 minutes we'd get from the network, and we'd just do a quick highlight of what was coming up during the day. So I think it was a few years after that Channel 10 started that Sunrise show. And even while I've been at Channel 10, they've started it earlier and earlier. I think
now it's like 4:30, right?
4:30 in the morning. But there are people, if they're driving up to Boston, they're up and getting ready at 4:30. So there's been a market for it. I don't know if we're allowed to say this, but I will anyhow, expanding our news in the evening. We're going to do an hour at 10 o'clock.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that going to be more news magazine type programming, or just kind of a?
Not sure how they're going to fill it. We do a half an hour at 10 o'clock now, but
Yeah.
they're going to expand it. But it just goes to the fact that news is cheap to produce compared to buying Wheel of Fortune or, Oprah Winfrey or whatever are syndicated shows out there. For news, it's especially if you've already got the crew in, you're already doing a 10 o'clock news, do another half an hour, maybe hire an extra AP, associate producer. News is cheap, and that's why, when I started, there was a half-hour show, and you had a half a dozen reporters, and we would fight to get into the show. Well, now there's 5, 5:30, 6, 7. Now we're doing 10 as well. So from a half an hour, you're doing 2 hours of news. We probably don't have as many reporters. So instead of spending all day doing a story that could have run a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe sometimes 3, we get, I know at Channel 12, their stories are more like 1:05 to a minute 15. If I'm in the 5:30 show at my place, it'll be a minute 15. A minute 30 is the maximum length of time. But I would do more, I do 2 or 3 stories a day at Channel 10 a few years ago. That's changed now, just because we get more product from Sinclair that runs in our shows.
Right.
They feed us a lot of stuff from there. They've got a news producing arm in Washington that has a small stable of reporters, and they'll do national stories, and we'll run those, and that takes up some of the time between 5 and 6:30. So I'm not doing as many stories a day, which is a relief, because as we get spread thinner and thinner, the coverage becomes more and more superficial. So
Right.
it's not good for the public to have one reporter doing 2 stories a day. Because TV stories are hard in that you have to cover ground. You have to physically drive from one place to another. So I can't just do a phone interview. I can't just get the facts and write them down. I've got to drive over there and do a stand-up in front of the place that we're doing it, or do a sit-down interview with a particular person. And then we have to edit it and get it together, and at the same time tune in the live shot. So there's a lot that goes into that minute and 15 seconds on the air that eats up your day, and is not engaged in gathering facts. It's just doing the logistics of the job.
It's like being in a band where it's like you're performing sometimes for 45 minutes. Well, by the time you start the day, loading everything up, checking the equipment, loading it up, driving to the venue, unloading it, setting up the stage, sound check, this, that. I mean, it's a 10-hour day for 45 minutes of work.
Right, exactly. Except for, in our case, it might be I'm on the air, I'm live on camera for maybe 15 seconds introducing the piece and 15 seconds exiting the piece. But if you got to drive out to Western Mass with a satellite truck, and they've got to set stuff up, and then you got to do all your shooting, it'd be 10, 12 hours to just be on the air for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's different. People don't realize what goes into it. You see Brian Crandall standing in front of Fall River City Hall. He looks good and he signs off, but somebody had to set up the truck. They set up the lights. They had to tune in the shot. There's a lot that goes into it.
Right. How long did he have to stand there? Like the other day, waiting for Yazel Correa, to walk out of City Hall to get that interview. One thing I thought about when I was watching Brian Crandall, he wasn't out of breath when he was asking those questions. He was it was ready to roll. That is hard, just to be ready for the moment, and then boom, here it is.
Right, and there were a bunch of other reporters who didn't get him because Brian hung in there longer.
Yep.
And he's known for being relentless, and he doesn't. It's funny. A lot of the kick we get out of our job as TV reporters is beating the other guy. It's very competitive, And sometimes that's as much of a thrill as anything else you do during the day is, oh, we got them and they didn't. And so Brian's good at that stuff.
I agree with that sentiment. You know what I mean? That it feels good to be the only voice or the only place to turn to for a particular bit of content or information or insight or personality, whatever it is. That is, I mean, it's a competitive aspect of it, but it's a healthy thing.
Yeah. I mean, it can be dangerous when you are so eager to be first with something that you run with it before it's fully checked out. And that's where the advent of Twitter has really kind of upset the apple cart, because people are putting stuff out on Twitter that are just rumors. And back in the day, we heard a lot of rumors that didn't get on the air. And there was an old photographer at Channel 6 when I was working there, Frank Kleins. I think he's still in the media business over in Swansea. But he'd say, Bill, news are just rumors we've been able to confirm. Yeah. And that's kind of the way it is. Accurate, we hear a rumor, and then it's like, chase it. And, we would always demand you had two people tell you about something. You couldn't have a single source, because A, that person could be wrong, and B, they might have an axe to grind. And it's okay for a guy on Twitter to be wrong, and then he can tweet out an hour later, oh, I was wrong about that. But when you put it on at 6 o'clock, it can't be wrong. Yep. And, we have a very long history of being right. And so we'll sit on something rather than put it out, even if it's being tweeted by somebody else, until we've been able to confirm it. So that's frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that, especially live tweeting during debates. I was at the gubernatorial debates, and I think I live tweeted the first one, the WPRI one.
Yeah.
And then by the time it got to the Gene one, the Channel 10 one, like the third and final debate, I think I just turned off my phone. I was like, this is just, there's already someone else doing this. You're getting ahead of the context gets lost. What's really the value of that? If you're already in front of a screen, couldn't you just watch the actual debate?
If you're in front of a screen, I think that what I tell myself, and I was into Twitter for a while. Now I read it a lot, and even then, it's distracting. It's just sort of like looking through a comic book. It's not really adding much to my understanding of things. But if you don't have a screen, I know that, like I don't have probably shouldn't say this. I don't have a TV at home. But
same here. So no TV in this place.
So I was trying to keep track of a Stanley Cup game or something, and I'm going onto Twitter trying to, well, who's staying up with this score here,
Good point. Right.
The NHL sometimes has little video clips they'll throw so I can see the goals and stuff. But yeah, it's so Twitter's kind of for people who are not in front of the TV set, or if you're at an event, like I know. I just saw the other day a guy that used to work with us is up at a station in Boston, and he was at the trial of the Varsity Blues people who were fixing their kids getting into college. And that was in federal court, and there's no cameras in the courtroom, which is another question altogether. But his tweets were how a lot of people were following what was going on. So there are occasions when you're putting out news that isn't available any other way. What your audience is, I'm not sure. And that's what... See, at Channel 10, even with our website, which we all contribute to, and we try to keep, as current and robust as we can, it doesn't make any money to speak of, or it's a tiny percentage of money compared to what the TV station makes. So I've almost gotten to the point like, all right, it's great that, Ted Nesi has 14,000 Twitter followers. But that's not paying the bills. I'm supposed to be on TV. That's where the station makes their money. So, if I'm not doing Instagram, they're not going to ride me on it. If I want to build up my followers, I suppose I could. But if I spend my day with my head in the phone trying to stay up to date on Instagram or see what other people are tweeting, I'm not, we get our assignment in the morning. and I'm trying to make it as fully fleshed out as I can during the day. And there comes a point in the day when you have to stop collecting information and start putting it together for presentation. And when I was younger, I would push it right up until the half hour before the newscast.
Yeah.
And that puts a lot of strain on the photographer and the producer and everybody else involved, the guy running the live truck. I mean, it's just, and I've learned, after 30 plus years, that sometimes it's better to concentrate. Okay, you've got enough. You think you understand the story. Let's work on making it presentable, so that people can also understand what you know. And yeah, I could get one more shot, or maybe there's one more interview I could get, but is it really going to enhance the presentation in the end? Especially when, and I've run into this a lot, and sometimes it happens just by circumstance. Like yesterday, we didn't do our last interview till it had to be after 4:00, and we were in the 5:30, and we were down in Newport, and then we had to run to the location, set up the live shot and stuff, and it just hadn't been available until then. But if I'd had that interview earlier in the day, I would have cut the earlier, 3:00 or 3:30, and started settling down and trying to put it together. Because in a minute 30, you're trying to tell the whole story. You got to be careful. You got to be balanced. And so it's good to digest it a little bit, and then you pick out the best sound bites. And if you're working right up until the deadline, then when you're putting it together, you're slapping it together. And it's like the trade-off. I mean, was it worth getting that one more interview at the sacrifice of making the story understandable and complete? And I've learned, no, it's not. It's better to settle it down. You don't want to be running out in front of the camera breathless without having put your thoughts together. And you don't want to make that editor put the story together in 20 minutes instead of taking 45 and making the shots match and the sound come together. And so you have to strike that balance. When do you stop collecting information and start putting it together?
Yeah, the governor essentially, on yourself. The limitation of.
Yeah, it's like, okay, and that's why it's nice being with a partner, a photographer who says, okay, I think we better get to work here and stop driving around looking for another interview. Yeah. Like my brother, Charles, wrote books, and they would be 3-year propositions, and he'd get 2 years of research and 1 year of writing. And invariably, after 2 years, there was more stuff he wanted to do. He wanted to research more. He found something else. There was another trove of documents. These were historic books, books about history. And but you got to get the job done. And you could do research. It's not like Robert Caro, who could spend 10 years working on one book on Lyndon Johnson.
Right.
At some point you have to give the publisher what they need, and we have to give the viewers. I mean, our deadlines come inexorably. There's nothing we can do about.
Yeah.
Oh, give me another 15 minutes. It's like, no, you don't get 15 more minutes.
That's a huge difference between maybe the future, maybe not though. I mean, where news is going once it gets to kind of the phone and then the tablet, away from television down the line, is will that more on demand, where will you be able to file a story without it having to be in a 6 o'clock package? Will it just be a collection of on-demand clips, or will there still be a newscast? I don't know. I guess there is something about having a deadline.
Oh yeah.
Print/television style. This is when it needs to be completed, because it makes the journalist tell the story in a certain.
Yeah,
it
also makes the job tolerable, because if I didn't have a deadline, I'd never finish a story.
Right.
Because there's always something else to find out, another person to talk to, another point of view. It's almost never totally wrapped up. And I've never gone home and said, oh, I did that just right. There's always, I could have done something different. I should have taken a different soundbite or started off the story. It's storytelling too. And, maybe I should have started this way. And it's always, we get it on, and then you look back and it's like, I could have improved it a little bit here and there.
Yep.
And I've never said that was just right.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's good to know. I'm not the only one who's a maniac in that regard, you know. I think pretty much everyone is in any kind of content creation. If you're shooting a film, if you're telling news, whatever it may be, it's there.
You try to be perfect, but you never do.
Let's talk about Channel 10 now, the Sinclair component of it, and how that's, that kind of factors what you do on a day-to-day basis or doesn't factor into what you do on a day-to-day basis. Because obviously it's well known, there's the Coletta scripted read, and that created a dynamic that I think, a lot of people don't have a grasp on what actually is going on at 10 on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I would say that it's no different. I've always worked for a big corporation. So whether it was General Electric or Media General or Tribune, I worked for Tribune. I worked for Gannett. I work for Sinclair. Now, I don't think I've ever shared political philosophy with the corporate bosses who run the TV stations. We put out news, and its value is determined by people's acceptance of us being objective and that we're trying to do balanced news. Although, there are certainly outlets which are obviously not objective and putting out news that people want to hear from their point of view. But what we're really doing is selling soap, right? We're just trying to get eyeballs so that people will buy from the advertisers that are paying us to put this stuff out there. So working for Sinclair, to me, is no different than working for General Electric when they owned NBC. Except that there are people that really don't like where Sinclair's coming from politically, and that there are stickers saying "Turn off 10."
Yeah, there's a whole website and everything.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, our ratings are still going up. And we had, there were a dozen people that came down and protested outside the station for a while. Turn off 10. Sinclair's bad for the country, and that's great. Everybody should protest when they feel they need to make a change. Of course, the Sinclair people didn't see that there were 12 folks with signs outside of the station. They're down in Maryland, and they're running some 200 stations around the country, and they have their strategy, which it appears to be that they want to compete with Fox from the right. Now, how it affects us locally is not at all in terms of editorial decisions. Nobody from Sinclair's ever said, you need to do a story about, how these liberal Democrats are ruining the country. They've never... As long as the station's making money and leading in the ratings, they're happy to cash the checks, and they're not going to come in and start tinkering with it and mess things up. That episode where they had anchors all around the country read the same statement was actually, it was well-intentioned. If you listened to the statement, what they were trying to say is that we're not going to do fake news. We're always going to give you fair and balanced kind of thing, which we've seen how Fox has turned that slogan into something that may or may not be what you think is fair and balanced. But I think the company felt that was, they've never tried to do that again. I don't know that they ever apologized for it, but they did explained it. It was only, if you listen to what that script was, it was that we are not going to put on biased news. And I applaud that we don't want to put on biased news. Now, where you will see, and I don't see our newscast because I'm usually out in the field with a earpiece in and getting ready to talk, that our local content has more canned stuff from Washington that Sinclair's affiliate or Sinclair's division creates. And that means a little bit less in the way of local news stories. On the other hand, when we were trying to fill that 2 hours between 5:36 and 7 with local news, we were being asked to do 2 or 3 stories a day.
Individual journalists were.
Yes. And so we were not able to do our stories as completely as if we just had one story to work on during the day. So with Sinclair picking up some of the slack there in that long news window, I'm able to spend more time. I'm back to doing more or less one story a day, which to me is a treat. You know, it had gotten really hectic for a while. I was a one-man band first time around when we first started introducing it in the market. Partly because I had that experience in Fall River Cable of having done that, and so it wasn't quite as much of a stretch for me as reporters who'd come up with never used a camera before. But the next thing I knew, I was doing 4 and more items in a day.
Wow.
Carrying my own camera around.
TV news items. That's wacky.
It is wacky.
That
I mean,
is
some
too
of them
much.
are simply just take pictures of
Yeah.
a scene and write a little bit about it for what we call a voiceover. But that was getting to be a burnout again. And I am so happy that now, then the union steps in and says, all right, you're creating a new job here for these VJs, video journalists. And we're going to create a new classification. So there's a reporter, there's a photographer, and then third job is a VJ. And so in order to try to encourage more people to be VJs, they offered them a car to take home and a little bit of a pay raise. And I'd been at it for a couple of years under that new style, and considered it and chose not to be a VJ. I'd rather be a reporter and work with a photographer. You do a better job. I mean, as good a photographer as I might have thought I was, when you're trying to collect the facts and take the pictures, you're not doing as good a job as if you're doing one or the other. And two heads are better than one, and a professional photographer is better than I was, and they're taking pictures while I'm talking to the fire chief, finding out what's going on. So you can't do both at once. So it's much better to have a 2-man crew. And the thing that I found bothered me the most was driving around by myself all day. I didn't realize that was going to be an issue, but it's not. It's just not as fun.
Yeah.
Next thing I'm listening to you on the radio instead of
Yeah, look out.
making
True
phone
boredom
calls.
sets in. Yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. I feel like that is what as a singer-songwriter and now as a podcaster, I have integrated Pro Tools, the program here, the audio program, into my life in such a way that it is just a part of what I do. I'm lucky that I got in on that in 2006. My best friend Chris and I both were like, all right, let's learn Pro Tools now so we can record ourselves, this, that, and the other. And it is effective. I'm able to do way more in a sense. But at the same time, there's nothing like working with a producer in music in particular, but also even in radio, working with having those two heads. Somebody's operating the board, someone's operating the mics, and you're just doing you. And I hope that there's not further breakdown, because it used to be there would be 6 people. You'd have a tape operator or this person or that all different jobs. And
and everybody's bringing their best to the product, and collaboration makes it better.
Right, that's what's lost in it, is that ability to have discussion, make a last second call with somebody else and feel good about it. Those are human emotions that'll just be lost if we become one-on-one, just brain to phone or whatever, brain to device.
Yeah. No, fortunately, we still get our scripts read by somebody else, because that's always imperative. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. Somebody else will pick up on mistakes or point out that you didn't really explain something here. So fortunately, we still have that. But the news business is changing a lot. And the delivery of news is going to be the next big shift, or it's shifting now. And this idea that you got to get home by 6 o'clock to see the news is really no longer.
I wonder what year we'll start to see massive removal of broadcast antennas, when they'll just become a thing of the past. And then some of them will be end up like the Henderson Bridge. They're just there rusting for, decades after the fact, people climbing them. But how far out do you sense from a strategy standpoint in terms of Sinclair, or also just in terms of NBC10's approach? I think Studio 10 shows me a lean towards a different demographic that program also could ultimately move to digital very effectively.
Yeah, I guess it'll be when the audience changes. When the kids that don't watch TV today become grown-ups, we're going to find that nobody's turning on the TV at 6 o'clock. And that's when there'll be a big push to get online, or, Sinclair's already working this way toward the delivery to your mobile device. And they've struck up partnerships with YouTube to carry the newscasts in all the cities, I think, that they're in. Not that the teenagers are going to want to watch Gene Valiceni and Patrice Wood read the news.
You never know. There's certain psychos out there like me that probably would have.
But they're at least they're setting up the system so that it will be on your phone and it won't be at a TV set. And until we the revenues have decreased drastically since it was just 3 stations and no internet. But it's still where the money is for the TV stations. I mean, some places put more into their website in terms of resources than other places do. But I think those that are spending more on their websites are kind of just setting the table for when those do become profitable. Because right now, the money isn't there.
It's just banner ads or even bonus ads.
Yeah, I don't know how it works. I have a daughter that worked in selling internet ads, and there's a lot of different ways to do it, and that's still shaking out as to what's the formula. And certainly there are websites that make a ton of money, but right now, not compared to what the broadcast brings in. It's just when they see the pie chart of revenues, the website is just a couple percent. I mean, it's less than 5% of where the money's coming from. So for now, we're still TV centric, and it's still where the revenues are. And I think that as much as you might try to steer the market, and you might say, all right, we're gonna commit to the website, and we're gonna drive more people to the website, and we're gonna start making money off the website, and we're gonna get more eyeballs there so that it pays off for the advertisers. It doesn't happen until the people start moving that way. Like you were saying before we started, how NPR's making more money on their podcasts than they are off their radio broadcasts.
Yeah. Yep.
That works for their audience, perhaps. For Channel 10, that's not going to happen. That's not for years will it be that the podcasts are making more than the ads for the furniture companies and the car companies, and that's where they're reaching their audience. But it's getting older every year, our audience. I think our demographic is, well, I don't know. I don't follow that stuff, but I know that it's more the old people that come up to me in the street than the young people who don't even know who I am, right?
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that shift there's room for it. People I think would follow a very well done Instagram account by Channel 10 or any network if it was really well done. But if it was just kind of like half-hearted, I think you would lose it. You lose the interest.
There are some I've seen on Instagram. I think NBC does one, and it doesn't look at all like the TV cast. It's a guy who's not wearing a tie, and and there's a lot of graphics that come over while he's talking about stories, and it's that new kind of storytelling techniques that we see online that you don't yet see on TV, and there's certainly crossover, and it's changing for sure. I think that, I don't know, if I was starting out, I'd be much more concerned about building my Twitter followers and my Instagram account. I opened those things when they started. I mean, I've got a lot of Twitter followers, but I'm not giving them much anymore. I just don't spend as much time tweeting about stuff. And it's sort of like you were saying. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, we work in TV. We don't see our audience reaction. We don't know how many people are watching, but we see the ratings every night. We know that there's tens of thousands, and so you feel like you're presenting to a significant audience, and you have to do it right. In Twitter, I don't know how many people are looking at my tweets, and I don't know if it's useful to them. And I feel, the times I'll go back and do it eagerly or with more effort is at breaking news events, and if it's something big, like we're waiting for Jaisal Correa to come out, or the city council in Fall River with the vote on asking him to resign or step down, and when that's happening in between newscasts, you do need to get it out there because, even Kathy Gregg, she's gotten very much into tweeting about stuff, and she's from the old school, but adopting these new ways of reaching your audience. It's funny, audience engagement and your personality. When we started in this business 30 years ago, me and my colleagues, it was sort of seen as unprofessional to show your personality. As, we're supposed to be objective and straight up and not using inflammatory language and not no colloquialisms and no kind of this is how I feel about it. Now more and more you're almost encouraged to, well, not encouraged, but the audience wants to relate to you, I guess. And so there's an advantage to being a little more, human, I guess. And I got to say, nowadays, what do they call it? The mortuary stand-up? The guy, with the tie who doesn't move and just stands there stiffly like a wooden cigar store Indian. Those have become out of style. And so it's a balance trying to let people know who you are, but at the same time, be totally neutral about the story you're covering. And I think Geraldo sort of did this when he was in New York and why he got notoriety. He was doing stories in housing projects, and I think really expressing some sort of outrage, like, I can't believe this is happening. Well, how can these people be treated like this? And, he was ahead of his time in terms of being real about what you're seeing and not standing stiffly and describing it in cold and impersonal language.
Right. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's different.
It's definitely evolved.
Yeah. And I think as the delivery system evolves, that will be with it, that people will go to news presenters who they can identify with.
Last question, you mentioned Ted Nesi. I mean, we've got the Boston Globe making a play in Rhode Island now. There's a pretty robust local media here, obviously shrinking, but in terms of outlets, in terms of personalities, how does that play into your work? Do you feel it drives a certain level of competition, or is it, you kind of have the blinders on here?
Yeah, it's more of the blinders. I mean, look, as a news guy, I relish more outlets. It really bothers me when 6, 10, and 12 have the same rundown on any given newscast. And I see it happening in the newsrooms where everybody's got the other guys on the monitors and and watching their tweets. And it's like, oh my God, this station is over there at this event and it really looks bad. Get over there. In the day, it wouldn't have been like that. And there would be more differentiation in the three newscasts because we're all focusing on our own thing, talking to our own sources. Now, we all relied on the newspaper. The newspaper's gotten thinner. We're not getting, it doesn't do the statewide coverage it used to do. So we miss out on that. And unfortunately, it's almost made our focus get narrower, and we're getting more and more like each other and less divergent. So it's fascinating to me that the three guys they hired, or gal and two guys at the Globe, two former Pro-Joe reporters, a former website guy, are breaking stories, local stories for the Globe that are just the Journal never got near.
Right.
And the TV stations never got near. I mean, that whole thing with the books that Fran Gallo bought.
Yep.
Or Amanda Milkovich's story about I don't know if she was still with the Pro-Joe, about the Boston cop who lost his gun to a couple of dancers.
She was already with the
Globe?
The Globe at that point, yeah.
And it just goes to show we need more outlets. The public is not well served when we're all doing the same thing. And that's the whole point of a plethora of news gatherers, that there are people picking up on stuff that the other guys aren't. And we're all looking for new stories. So, yes, I think totally we've got less reporters than we did 10 years ago, because the Journal's down to 15 or something. And they used to have 9 people in the State House Bureau.
It's crazy.
And they had bureaus all around the state. And the TV stations, I think, are, because we're still making money, the papers aren't making money. That's why they're laying people off. So we do still have some bodies, but as we were talking about before, all the work that goes into making a TV story prevents us from maybe getting as many stories outside what was in the paper this morning or on the police scanner this afternoon as we might. So it's great that the Globe is in here trying to make waves. It's great that that Channel 12 has a thick website team, and that that's where Dan McGowan came out of before he went to the Globe, and Nisi does most of his work on the website, and it's a lot of stories that wouldn't go over big on TV because they're numbers stories and trend stories, and while we're good with the graphics and stuff, TV's still about pictures and sound, and that's why people watch. It's funny. That's why one reason why you see so many car crashes on TV is that people actually want to see those things. I remember when I first came in 2002 and I was made the political reporter, and I would check in with the website every morning. Hey, how'd my story do? It was always even on the web, pictures of car crashes were number one. And it just makes you shake your head and like, why am I in this business? I don't want to just run around to see car crashes and house fires. But it's, TV, they say TV started going downhill because of 60 Minutes. Because until then, news had been something that the networks did at a loss. They spent a lot. There were more bureaus overseas then than there are now, because they felt it was a public service, and in order to enhance the success of a democracy, you need people that know what's going on, and we got to tell them what's going on. Well, 60 Minutes came on with their stories that were so compelling that they started getting ratings, and they made money. And the news directors all said, wait, you can make money off of news. And then the next thing you know, they're doing a story every night from OJ's trial in Los Angeles. And it's taking up a big chunk of the news hole that is not dedicated to what's going on overseas or what's happening in the inner cities or what is important to a democracy. We're serving dessert instead of vegetables now. And so that's why we're running car fires and house fires and car crashes, because people want to see it. So our job is to give them what they want to see, not what they should know. And I think we're seeing we're paying the price. We see it in our politics.
Yeah.
that people are, it's self-interest and ignorance in a lot of cases. People know a lot more about the Patriots' defensive secondary than they do about their elected officials and what the scheme is for the next tax rate.
Oh, most definitely. It's interesting. I'm not like opposed to sports. At one point, I was, when I was younger, I really liked sports a lot. You know what I mean? Like the 2004 Red Sox, for example. I was into that. But and I understand sports too. But it is in this region. It seems like you'd be more likely to walk up and say, all right, if I tell you, tell me who, like the number 3 wide receiver is for the Patriots versus who's the Speaker of the House. Guaranteed, you're going to get probably 5-1 for the Patriots.
Yep.
And that's sort of,
but the media contributes to that because
Absolutely.
That's what people want to see. So you're going to see on the front page of the paper that the Patriots won 43-0.
Right.
And you're not going to see some of the backroom maneuvers that are going on regarding contracts for the state.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. And it's almost made to be, because you have the sports cast, which, look, Frank Carpano does a great job, and go back to Keith Russell doing the rhymes back in the day on Channel 10 or whatever it is. But yeah, that's a dedicated segment every day that you're going to get hit with. Well, why not make that segment, like you say, a public service? Here's what happened. Same guy, just fast-paced. Frank Carpano comes out. Here's what happened at the legislature today.
Right.
But no one would care. That's why.
That's why. The people that you could hear the stations changing channel. Because people have tried it and it just doesn't pay. I know. I always asked myself, why, when we do a sports segment, we are promoting businesses. These are franchises that are making a ton of money. Why do we have to advertise for them every night?
And they're not. The other thing too is they're not. Rhode Island does not have to be Boston's junior partner. It doesn't have to be here where you so many people walk around with a B on their head. You know what I mean? Come on, we have something here. If you're going to get into jingoism, which is essentially what that is, you may as well do it. I get the Patriots are right here and all that. And
right, there's no professional Rhode Island to watch on TV.
Right. So I get that you go there, but it encourages this other thought process of, well, yeah, we're the junior partner to Boston. That's where you go if you want to be big time, so to speak. And maybe that's true. I don't think it's true. I think it's more New York and international locations than anything. But, it's Rhode Island doesn't have that crisp identity, that pride that people seem to have for a professional sports organization that is not even, they play here, but it's barely tied to the region.
Well, right. And even the people in Boston, they talk about our team. Well, yeah, until the owner wants to move it, or until our quarterback until he gets traded. It's just a business. But it's crazy how people get so wrapped up in it, and it may just, it's not anything new. The sports events have always attracted huge crowds. It used to be bicycle racing and horses, but now, whatever it is, it's a distraction from the everyday life of trying to keep your head above water and pay the bills and keep your kids out of trouble.
Yep, the bread and circuses. But yeah, that is a challenge, though. In you just, it's not just sports, just things. And again, I'm not anti-sports. I really am not. Like, I could break down a football game, analyze it for you and give you. I wouldn't be able to give you in depth, but I understand what's going on. But I'm looking at you're saying the jingoism, the fact these are private businesses. Who cares if their plane's taken off from TF Green? Who cares? There's, why run that? But again, people want it.
But then look at our society. Look how we reward those people who can throw a round ball through an iron hoop versus the people who are trying to teach our kids in school.
Bingo, right?
It's just it's a reflection of the society, and it gets more and more disparate. I mean, the money for the stars just gets bigger and bigger. I remember it was a big deal when Mickey Mantle was making as much as the President of the United States. Well, now look at what these guys are making. He was making $100,000, right?
Right.
Now they're tens of millions of dollars a year for being able to hit a curveball.
Yeah. The equity side of it that comes from the fact that because it's being consumed and you've got X amount of dollars going into the advertising, that the person who should really be rewarded the most is the person on the field. But at the same time, it's just like you're saying, it's a broad, holy Moses, where are we?
Yeah.
And where does this bubble burst? I went on after Rob Gronkowski, retired. He came out, he did this pro CBD press conference, and Bernie got emotional at one point. And I was like, wow, that actually kind of hit me, because I was like, how many, I know football's super dangerous and can result in long term, but I've watched or whatever here and there, or in some cases every game of a season, and enjoyed it. And then I thought, wow, what is this that we've gotten ourselves into? And I went back and looked. This is kind of sick, but I Wikipedia'd in-ring boxing deaths, and since the modern day rules are created, and you see that there was an uptick. You go into the 50s. I mean, people literally got killed in the ring, as this is the most or second most popular sport in the country. And you're thinking, wow, it has always
from
been
the gladiators,
there.
right?
It's the same gladiator mentality. That's what it is. What are you going to do?
Right. What are you going to do? Like when I was doing politics at the State House exclusively, all the news director wanted was scandals. I'm like, wait, some of these guys are trying to do good work. Can't we talk about some of these programs? No, it's boring. Nobody wants to hear about that. They want to see, a guy going off in handcuffs.
Right. That's it. The Rhode Island political mugshot club.
Hey, they have them in other states too. We beat up ourselves a little bit too much about that.
No, that's true. Absolutely. New York, living there.
Massachusetts had 3 speakers in a row go to jail.
Right.
Yeah.
Bill Rappleye, ladies and gentlemen. On that note, I know you got to get to Channel 10 down.
I better do some work today.
Yeah, something like that. As always, great to spend time together here on the pod. Remember, I'll be back on Friday with a brand new episode, and there's over 130 episodes waiting for you on your preferred podcast app, ripodcast.com or bartholomewtown.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.